Hello and welcome back to the Shakey Sonnet Show. I am Tootight Lautrec, the drag laureate of the Sonnetarium, and we are here once again in the Sonnetarium at the bottom of the down staircase in the permanently sequestered remainders section of an unnamed local library which may or may not have a pair of stone-cold lions sitting on the front steps looking as if they are dead tired of all the hypocrisy, all the idiocy, all the trumpery, yes, I said it, that goes on in the world today. Looking as if they were so sick and tired of all the fakery that they could just spit. But that's not very ladylike, now is it? No, it's not. And I should know. Which brings us today to Sonnet 66, an intense, strange little sonnet that's a departure in tone and in style from all the other 153 sonnets in the 1609 quarto. The first time I read this, I thought of it as a mourning poem, but on further rereadings, I've come to see that it's simply just a violently unhappy love poem. Which in fact makes it all that much more interesting to me. And yet I have donned my widow's weeds, or perhaps my widow's glitter, as the case may be, because I am truly in mourning for my dear friend Olive Martini, better known on the streets as Dirty Martini. And although it's not quite a complete burial, it's more of an hasta luego sort of thing. It's just that it feels like a death. Because despite my sustained and strenuous efforts in the Sonnetarium gymnasium, I still haven't been able to shed those last 5 or 8 or 10 pesky pandemic pounds. And so after a very emotional, and by emotional I mean angry, consultation with Dr. Frankensonnet, we've decided that maybe, possibly, perhaps, if I lay off the hooch for a while in order to decrease my caloric burden, as Dr. Frankensonnet so quaintly terms it, if I go on the wagon, maybe I can get rid of some of those pounds. So I'll mourn the loss of my vodka martinis and my wine at dinner until I'm a little bit more svelte sans Spanx. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be abandoning our cocktail party vocabulary word. I'll be drinking a sparkling water with a wedge of lime, which has a nice little bite on the tongue, which you want every once in a while. But of course you can drink whatever suits your fancy, and I hope your fancy is really quite fancy. And today we'll be celebrating the word Ineug, E-N-E-U-G, Ineug, or Inuch, or I can't even pronounce it when I'm sober. I can't figure out how to pronounce it, but it's E-N-E-U-G, and I'll go with Ineug. Because Sonnet 66, I'll set this to the side, Sonnet 66 follows the form of an Ineug, which is a genre of lyric poetry practiced by the troubadours in Provence in the 12th and 13th centuries. And there's a scholar, E.H. Wilking, who in a 1915 publication explains that the Ineug has 3 regular characteristics: the list, the initial repetition, and the emphatic presence of a word denoting annoyance. And if you look at Sonnet 66, check, 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 we have an Ineug. And apparently the word Ineug is a Provençal term derived from the Latin word inodium, which means vexation. And I'll put a link to in the description box below, which links to a JSTOR article from an LMLA article published in 1912 by a person named Raymond Thomas Hill, talking all about Ineug, and you can read about it to your heart's content. or until you can't see straight anymore. So Sonnet 66 derives from this unusual form in Enyug, and it's also, if you notice, it's one very long sentence, and it seems to evade the look of a sonnet or the feel of a sonnet, in that it doesn't separate logically into 3 quatrains and a couplet in terms of sense, like an introduction of an idea, an elaboration of it, and a summation of it toward the end. And it doesn't even fall into that kind of a octet, sestet pattern with a couplet forming the conclusion. But it does still have the iambic pentameter and the A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G form of the sonnet, which we have come to know as the English sonnet or the Shakespearean sonnet. So let us proceed to our Enyug-inspired Sonnet 66. Tired with all these, for restful death I cry, as to behold desert a beggar born, and needy nothing trimmed in jollity, and purest faith unhappily forsworn, and gilded honor shamefully misplaced, and maiden virtue rudely strumpeted, and right perfection wrongfully disgraced, and strength by limping sway disabled, and art made tongue-tied by authority, and folly, doctor-like, controlling skill, and simple truth miscalled simplicity, and captive good attending captain ill. Tired with all these, from these would I be gone, save that to die I leave my love alone. Vexation indeed. So here we have the list, which is they're all and. The list, what are the other characteristics? The list, the repetition, and the emphatic presence of a word denoting annoyance. And in this case, it's the word tired in the first line and in the 13th line. And even if it weren't there, we have the colon at the end of the very end of the first line, which announces vexation, and then since the colon sets up the repetition, we have the emphasis on them. So this narrator is tired to death. Death. For restful death I cry. That's quite a statement. This is not a playful sonnet. It's really quite dire. And most of these are quite even modern. They're pretty self-explanatory. To behold a desert, a beggar born, someone who is deserving of dignity and all good things, is born a beggar and may not get those things. A needy nothing trimmed in jollity, someone who's just a bit of a fop, all dressed up in sequins and feathers, perhaps. I don't know what he must be talking about, but that type of thing happens every once in a while. Purest faith happily forsworn, someone who's actually faithful ends up being accused of not being faithful. Gilded honor, shamefully misplaced, people who are honored, like, say, for instance, senators, who that honor is misplaced when they won't vote to raise the debt ceiling or something like that. Maiden virtue rudely strumpeted, that's self-explanatory, someone who's innocent and is made to look like a strumpet or a prostitute. Right perfection wrongfully disgraced, strength disabled, art made tongue-tied by authority. Some people think that that may be a reference to the censorship laws that were in place during Shakespeare's time, and that perhaps some of his plays were censored. Folly, doctor-like controlling skill. When you listen to conspiracy theories instead of actual science, you may get some pretty wild ideas that pass off as a skillful argument, but in fact, just get your vaccines is the modern take for me. Captive good attending captain ill, which is quite nice, that captive and captain, captain meaning the most, where good is held captive, and the ill becomes the dominant force. Tired with all these is the couplet, and here we have the repetition of tired of all these that we saw in the first line. From these would I be gone, save that to die I leave my love alone. And here there are a couple of possibilities. I only leave my lover would be one, or the second one, I leave my lover all alone without me, because if I killed myself, my lover would be alone, or I leave only my love, the disembodied emotion love rather than the actual lover. So there are a number of possibilities. It's quite a strong poem, quite a forceful idea, and really very dramatic. Is there any sort of indication of whether there's a male or a female or male? No, sadly, there is not. Or actually, maybe joyfully is not, because we can apply this to any number of speakers or recipients. It just ends up being a very lonely, lonely, lonely contemplation. And it's, again, not addressed to a beloved. It's simply a contemplation in the narrator's own head. So it's quite effective in that, too. Dramatically, where might it fit into situations in literature, for instance? Well, I guess anyone who's tired of all the fakery in the world, and so the first person that comes to my mind is Holden Caulfield, or absolutely Seymour Glass if you're a Salinger devotee. But in Shakespeare, who might be tired to death? I wonder. Hamlet, perhaps? Of course. Everyone and their cross-dressing uncle can see that. But I have to say that I don't actually think that this is something that we would see Hamlet say within the play. Perhaps this is a sonnet that might be uttered before the play even starts, before the ghost comes on the scene, because we don't really know what's been going on between Hamlet and Ophelia. We think that they may have done the deed, but I don't know for sure that Hamlet is in love with Ophelia, or was in love with Ophelia, and even if he were, perhaps with the suggestion from the ghost that his father has been murdered, and he sees the example of love between Claudius and Gertrude, maybe that's put a sour taste in his mouth, and love is not for him, and revenge is the thing that he will go after in the end. So perhaps Hamlet, but Hamlet in an earlier stage before the play starts. Narratively, well, my goodness, it certainly is dramatic, isn't it? This, if we think of this as the 65 poems that came before it as some sort of playing out of a couple, and now that they have been separated, they seem to really be separated, and the separation thing seems to be getting to our narrator. Again, it's an indirect address. It's an indirect address, which seems to emphasize separation still, because if they were together, it would be a one-on-one exchange. There is a scholar named Palgrave who says that sonnets 64, 65, and 66 form one long poem of marvelous power, insight, and beauty. And I suppose if one were to tack the last two lines of 66 onto the end of a 3-sonnet length poem, it would be quite a kicker. Then Don Patterson says that 66 is the beginning of a group of 5 sonnets where the narrator is in a very bad mood. I don't know about all that, but sonnet 66 is definitely very powerful, and I do feel for this narrator. It may be a rough road ahead for the next few sonnets, but let's get through it together, shall we? I hope that you are not tired to death, and that you are keeping your minds and your hearts open to the wonders that are in the world. Pay attention. Until we meet again, I am Tootight Lautrec.